I'm Dave Kerzner. We're here on Cruise to the Edge 2022. I'm playing songs from my new album that's coming out called The Traveler, new solo album. And you're on Morow.com.
A wave of evolution moves across the sand.
Well, like everyone that was on Cruise to the Edge, it was kind of chaotic at first because the pandemic started right before Cruise to the Edge 2020. So it was, just like we even thought we were going to go, because some of us, it was a test. It was an interesting test to see if artists were going to risk it. We're contracted to go, and so I would have gone if we had gone. But then it was, and I heard that it was gonna happen up until almost the last minute. And, getting refunds for flights and everything. It was very difficult, very at the beginning, especially because of Cruise to the Edge. And also a little side thing, Genesis was planning their last tour, like your shirt. Right, and they had invited me to rehearsals because I do some work with them, and it was in January when they invited me, and I couldn't make it because it conflicted with this thing called the NAMM show, which is a music show for musical instruments, and they're like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll be in Miami in April, and you can come to that one, and then that got canceled, and everything got canceled, and it was like, oh no, I should have gone in January when I could have, but it just. At first it was, it was difficult for everybody, and one of the things that I did to try to make it, a little better was two things. One, I participated in some online concerts. The Prog Report did one. They had a whole bunch of different artists, and we did, for one of them we did, I forget which one, we did Be the Light from my band In Continuum with Gabriel Agudo and Matt Dorsey, and we just sent each other tracks and we just did it like that. It was kind of cool. And then another one I did Wish You Were Here with Durga McBroom, myself, and Fernando Perdomo. So we did those two, and then I created a group on Facebook called Quarantine Cooking Ideas, because I thought, all right, I love to cook at home and I love to be creative and I like to share pictures of food, but I don't want to do it too much on my main page. And is this guy a chef or is he a musician? So I thought, all right, I let's make a separate group for this, and maybe it would be helpful to people during the pandemic who are not used to being stuck at home in quarantine, to get some ideas on how to cook some interesting things. So I created it, and I got Durga McBroom to help moderate it. She's a great chef, and we made it kind of invited our music fans and friends and people to it, but extended it. It's an open group, still around, and it was great. It got really active people, and I like being the one who makes the rules because I think my rules are fair. So it was all right, no vegan shaming. Vegans are welcome, but no meat, omnivore shaming, or just if it's not for you, then don't say anything. Be nice. Everybody be nice, and that's how it is. Everybody's very friendly there. Anyway, that's a side thing. It's great. And I've actually had people on the cruise come up to me and thank me. Thank you for making that group. It kind of helped me, give me ideas and made me feel better. And I was like, all right, there you go. So I like that kind of stuff.
All I see is real to me.
Musically speaking, I wasn't as productive as I thought I'd be. If I'm completely honest, I watched the Lord of the Rings extended trilogy twice, and the Hobbit extended. It was a little too quarantine, happy. The Breaking Bad entire, I was really, at first I was just kind of lazy and just sort of sitting there alone because I was alone, and I had a cat, and it was just kind of, I thought I'd be more productive, but it was a little weird at first. And then I started to tackle, I had created a really large it was a nice idea on paper, but an overload of live albums and Blu-rays to do. And the philosophy was good, which is I don't tour that much. I don't get to tour that much. It's not that easy to do, well, especially during the pandemic. But even before that, and I thought, well, we capture some shows, and for people, I have, these days, artists, music artists, and especially in Prague, but probably of all styles, have fans all over the world because of the internet. And it's really hard to be able to go everywhere. So, to Australia or something, or, and even France, which, I love. I've only played there a few times, had the chance to play there a few times, and other places. So doing a live Blu-ray is a chance for people to see how the Dave Kerzner band does things, because when I do the records, it's me producing and writing most of it and doing things, but then when we do it live, there's room for Fernando to just do his thing, and we do different arrangements, and it does sound different. Sometimes it sounds different every night. I don't even know what's going to happen at certain spots, but still, I work with a lot of really great musicians, and they bring their own thing to it. So it just comes alive on stage, and I love that we captured it, but I just got really ambitious, being like, hey, there's 4 live things. I'm like, oh my God, I should have just said one. Do one at a time, but I learned my lesson. So I did take those 2 years to finish everything, get all caught up, so that I could finally, this year now, actually next month, within this month, release a new studio album, which I had been working on. It's over all this time, it's not that I was not doing anything, but I'm always writing. And when I write songs, it's based on inspiration, and I have respect for, if you're in the zone and it's coming to you, then that's your schedule. It's like, okay, you gotta write it down, record it, okay, and that's not like, hey, I'm gonna sit down today and I'm gonna write a song. I never do that, because it's like, can't think of it. It's like you're putting yourself on the spot. I like to kind of, maybe I'll just sit down to work on something that's already kind of started, but okay, I gotta write lyrics today, and but it's usually kind of based on the flow. So I actually have 3 or 4 albums largely written and recorded. One of them's probably an In Continuum album. There's some new Montravega coming as well, but most of it's solo albums. And but there is one called The Traveler, and that I did work on over the pandemic, and I almost had ready for the cruise. In fact, I almost had ready a few weeks ago for Rozfest, but it's not quite ready. But when we're done with the cruise, I'm going to finish it, and so that's coming next. So in a way, it's kind of like, in terms of releases, it was mostly live stuff. But then it bottlenecked. So now my next thing is I could release 2 or 3 studio albums this year, potentially. Yeah. Acceleration Theory, Part 1 and 2, is its own complete story. In fact, what that is most of the second Sound of Contact album that would have been, with the story slightly changed, because the story originally actually connected to Dimensionon. It was going to be a prequel to Dimensionon. And of course, I didn't want to do that per se. You could still imagine it being a prequel, but I changed some of the characters and some of the things. And I had actually originally had a film script that never got made into a film called Acceleration Theory. I haven't finished writing it, but it might as well follow the film now, the film idea, because I can't afford to make films. So I just put it into progressive rock concept albums. And I combined that with the Aliana story, the female alien. That was the one that I actually came up with Letitia Wolf, but I pitched to Sound of Contact, and we were going to make and that was going to be Dimensionon's mom. It was going to be an alien or something like that, whatever. And so, it was a cool idea, but Letitia and I came up with this whole female alien, sort of like Fifth Element kind of character. And so I put that and combined it with this acceleration theory story, which was more about, kind of like a Spielberg-esque answer to why it is kind of bizarre when you look at human history, like why all of a sudden in the 20th century did we get all this technology? I mean, where did it come from? It just boom, like, man had been primitive relatively, and all of a sudden we have rockets and the internet and everything. So in the sci-fi story, it explained that aliens were sort of guiding our evolution, and then had this theory, well, what if we just kind of give them a little boost? And then it went bad because we were ready for it, and we're going to blow ourselves up, and that's when they came to basically wipe us out, because it was us versus the Earth, and they didn't want us to ruin the Earth. So it's kind of, I love that kind of plausible, suspension of disbelief, but that type of story where, you could almost imagine, what if it was really like that? But of course it's a story. So the story, to some extent, well, at least for we were going to do maybe 2 albums with Sound of Contact, but that's typical ambitious, thinking, so we had these extra songs that wouldn't have fit on the second album. And that was, I needed a home for that, because I don't want to write a song and no one ever hears it. But I don't have any more songs collaborated on with the other guys from Sound of Contact, still not recorded, released. So there would just be new songs written by me. And we've already started on it. So there's, whether it'll be called Acceleration Theory Part 3 but what, I don't know, but it will be the same characters. So Eliana is in it. I mean, Gabriel Agudo and Letitia Wolf, their role in the band is to play those characters. They're not like the leads. It's a different kind of band. It's not really a band. It's me. But I'm casting the people to do the different parts, especially vocalists. They play characters. So those characters at the moment will continue to be playing. Those singers will play those characters. And then we'll see how it evolves. This new album that I'm doing, The Traveler, actually connects the dots. The character who's the traveler, who is the traveler in New World, to In Continuum. So he's actually this, the new album's about a traveler who travels with his mind. And he's able to almost kind of telepathically communicate with people in different times and kind of see what's going on. Not physically, though, but like non-physically, like spiritually or whatever, like through organic life, like through plants and things. He can see what's going on and he can kind of communicate. So, probably in the deluxe edition and then on the next In Continuum album, you'll see the connection between my character on In Continuum. Maybe it's the traveler. You know what I mean? So, like the storyteller. And one of the songs I sing live here on Cruise to the Edge, actually. I sing about half the new album on Cruise to the Edge before it's even out. So people have no idea what those songs are. But Another Lifetime, I say the line, witness stories yet untold. And that's the traveler. He's witnessing, let's say, the story of all of the stories. Maybe even Dimension on story. He's just this kind of traveler who's able to kind of, not only witness it, but interfere with it, manipulate it, like suggest things, almost like a ghost or a spirit or something. But he's just a guy who's alive in some time, and he's traveling around with his mind and everything. So it's a trip, but there is a connection between all of it. The material on The Traveler, about half of it, a third of it is songs that I had for Dimension on, that we had played and we recorded, but we never finished because it would have to be a double CD. So that's what I mean when I say, like, okay, I feel a responsibility to the songs, especially if I like them, and I like them all, to finish them and put them out, just so it's not like, oh, sorry, that didn't work. Because a song I think it's more important than the people, because it lives on, and it's just, and it becomes, even like the listeners belongs to them in a way too. You know what I mean? It's like your responsibility as a songwriter, I think, and as a music artist, is to finish them and put them out. Find a way to put them out. So that's what I've done. And I have all these other songs that have nothing to do with sci-fi, nothing to do with these stories, nothing to do with the history of collaboration with anybody, or with different people like Kevin Gilbert and other things that I want to get to as well. But I felt like, you know what, I have to finish this. So The Traveler kind of puts a nice cap to that whole thing, going back to like Another Lifetime was a Sound of Contact song, or would have been, and a few other things, and they were really sounded great actually with that band, but no one will ever hear those versions unless Simon says okay. I'd love to play people those versions because Simon's drumming is so good, but I don't know if those will ever see the light of day. But so while In Continuum focuses on the second Sound of Contact album songs that we had actually worked on together, The Traveler has songs that I had pitched to the band that we jammed on, but we never finished, like the lyrics, and we never sang vocals for. So I finished them, and actually at one point, I struggled, actually. That's another thing, for 2 years, maybe 3 years, on whether The Traveler or most of the material should be an In Continuum album, or it should be a solo album. And it didn't quite fit with the style of the rest of it, but it has Marco on drums and has Nick on drums, so it has almost the same players as In Continuum, but it was kind of just a different vibe. And it was a little bit more like Dimension on, actually, as opposed to In Continuum, which is more like what the second Sound of Contact album would have been like, which is a little more, it's just different, but didn't sound as much like Dimension on. But these do, because they were from the same sessions, and they had a lot of that same kind of Genesis Duke vibe, and certain influences that were kind of happening at the time, Porcupine Tree and just whatever it was. And they're all amazing, and I'm never take it for granted. But so on drums, there's Nick DiVirgilio, and who's playing live with us for the first time, which is great. There's Marco Miniman, so the two drummers from Continuum. Actually, also Alex Cromarty is on a song, and that's the drummer from Montravega, and we toured live with him as well. And Stuart Fletcher on that song as well from Montravega. So there's one song that has them. Durga McBroom is on it. Fernando Perdomo, of course. Randy McStein, Francis Dunnery, John Davison, Billy Sherwood. So, because I have a band with them called Arc of Life, or I'm part of their band, really. And so it's cool to have them part of my thing. And, of course, we have Billy Sherwood on stage with us as well this time. So, and Matt Dorsey is on there. Yeah, the usual suspects. The album is a shorter album on purpose, so it fits. It's the first time I ever actually did the album thinking of the vinyl, because some of the stuff I do, I get asked to do vinyl all the time, but like New World Deluxe Edition would be like 6 LPs or something. I mean, like I didn't, I don't know how I would even do it, and I wasn't even thinking of that because it's such a old format, but it's made a revival and people love it and they ask for it. So I'm like, well, all right, let me discipline myself to see if I could do it. So it's an interesting album. It's about 45 minutes long, The Traveler, and it still has a nice, when you look at albums, interesting. Like I've collected a few vinyl. Some of my friends, Alejandro, we're like, all right, here's a present, for your birthday. Here's Dark Side of the Moon on vinyl. I'm like, wow. I mean, I have had that. I think I gave away my vinyl collection, and I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. But and then he gave me Duke actually as a present. And I was looking at Duke, I'm like, this is one LP, and yet it feels like a nice balance of pop and prog, and it's kind of a concept album, sort of. And I thought, if they can do it, I can do it, like discipline myself to make it feel like it's not too short, or it's not, if anything, sometimes it's a little long, and sometimes, but I like both. I like to stretch out too. So the way I did it this time, I'm really excited about, because there's the main album, which is very concise and kind of has that kind of same flow as Duke, an album like Duke. You've got some instrumental proggy stuff, and then you've got these songs, and you have like 4 on each side, and it's a satisfying listening experience that doesn't, that anyone can enjoy. And then the second disc I'm working on, which might take a few extra months, is like it ties everything together, and it's a real trip, and it's like a whole full CD of music with some reprises and some songs and some ambient bits and some things that connect to Static and New World, and it's for like the super fan who's really into it. But I think the casual music listener will appreciate the first album to be like, oh, here's a song, here's a song, here's a song, here's a song, and it doesn't feel like it's just random. It's actually still connected. So it was a challenge to do that.
In the doorway there's a watering eye.
Yeah, well, okay, I mean, there's the long story and the short story. The short story is I've done some work with them, and I was at their studio once, and I was pulling equipment out from back to record with and stuff, and I said, oh, where's the Mellotron Mark II? And they're like, oh, we sold that. I'm like, you sold it? I'm like, all right, listen, next time you sell something, call me, please. And they remembered, and they're selling the farm, their studio, and they called me first. And that was a huge mistake, because I was like, I'll take this. So I picked all the good stuff. And they didn't want to do it publicly, so they only reached out to people they know and work with. And, a lot of them, like Nick Davis isn't going to buy all those keyboards. And like, I think one of the techs at the studio, or one of the assistants, bought one of the Prophets, and I bought the other one, Prophet 10. And, certain people they knew bought the equipment, but myself and 2 friends of mine, Tom and Chris Lord-Alge, who are big-time engineers and huge Genesis fans, went in on a container, to send the stuff over. And so they bought some of the rack equipment. I bought some of it too, and some microphones and effects. I bought all their effects pedals. I just said, how much for all of them? Because there's some really good ones. And they in particular used a lot of really cool stomp boxes. Tony, even as a keyboard player, it's a big part of his sound. But yeah, I got the ARPs, the Mellotron, the RMI. I mean, I didn't get like the Rolands and the Korgs and things like that. I got a few for some friends. I was like, all right, you want Tony Banks D50? I mean, I tried, because we had a container. So I was like, all right, it was the same price even if you put like a sofa in there. So, but I got my favorite setups of his. I have, and I complimented. I had some of it already myself, so I didn't get his CP70. I have an electric Grand already, and it's I would have, but I to limits, also limited funds. It wasn't cheap. They were very fair, but it was it adds up. Vintage keyboards aren't cheap these days. So I got like my dream setups, which would be the Abacab 3-size live rig with the ARP Quadra and the Prophet 10, that you see in the video. That was like a big thing for me as a child. And growing up, it's my first introduction to Genesis at my age. And then, but the Lamb, I gotta have the Lamb rig. So I have his RMI and the Mellotron, and I have my own ARP Pro Soloist, and Chris bought the Hammond. I should have bought it, actually. But I have a similar Hammond already. I have an L, and he has the T102. But anyway, I sampled them all so that that's the other thing, because that's what I do, for my day job, is I have a company called Sonic Reality, and we partner with companies like IK Multimedia and create plugins. And, we sample everything. We sample orchestras and drummers and drum grooves and keyboards. And so I have a sample collection coming out that, anybody who's into this can have a virtual version of Tony Banks keyboards and stuff. So it was good that it came to me so that I can use them myself and do something like that, so other musicians could be like, oh, that's the sound, as opposed to it just going to some collector and it being behind glass and never played again and never heard, because they're still really cool sounds.